in the IWIN meeting. So we have two very accomplished and profound women for the meeting today. And thank you. I want to thank Ashwati and Microsoft for sponsoring the meeting today. Ashwati is with Microsoft, and before her experience with Microsoft, she was the lead attorney for Software Watson and Channel Partners India South Asia Business Unit at IBM India. Ashwati and Ms. Revati Ashok are going to speak on diversity and inclusion. Ashwati, I request you to take over and introduce Ms. Revati Ashok and take this forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Shohini.
And I am Shohini. I am the Vice Chair of IWIN International Committee. If you have any questions, and all you lovely ladies, if you want to join, please join IWIN. Please speak to me if you have any questions on how to join IWIN. It's a very simple process, but please do join IWIN. We have been a very close organization within the iTech Law Association, and I'm proud to say that IWIN has been historically a very important part of iTech Law, and we have always, I always look forward to the IWIN sessions in any iTech Law conference. So I'm sure you will have fun and you will enjoy the session today as well. Over to you, Ashwati.
Thanks, Shohini. Lovely introduction, and yeah, please follow up on whatever Shohini was saying with respect to IWIN. Thank you for attending this session, and a very warm welcome to all of you. I want to take this opportunity to sort of introduce Revati to you. She is so accomplished. Like, she told me specifically, do not read out from my bio because it's so long. So we have a very, concise and short version of what Revati has done so far. She's currently the co-founder of Strategy Garage, which is a strategy and growth consulting firm for startups. So she has a lot of experience in helping them to build value and scale. She's also one of the very few female angel investors that we have today. She's a member of the Indian Angel Network and Let's Venture investing platforms with investments in over 15 startups such as Dhruva, Jigsy, Pickle, so on and so forth. She works very closely with her investee companies on strategy, growth, and governance. And previously, she was the MD for Tishman Spear, which is a private equity fund again. I know Revati is going to say that gender plays no role, and but she is really one of the few women who have been in that space as well. During her tenure with Sintel, which is a US-based NASDAQ IT company, she was the worldwide CFO. So I think Revati, being a member of multiple boards of several leading giants in the country today, like Wellspun, Quest Corporation, there's a lot of information and a wealth of experience there that we're going to tap into today. And briefly about myself, I think Shohini was just like sort of reading off my LinkedIn profile. I am a technology lawyer out and out. I've always been an in-house counsel. It was a professional choice for me because I'd interned in law firms and I didn't feel comfortable with the kind of connection that law firms don't have with their clients. And I felt that I wanted to have a more in-depth understanding of business. I wanted to be a business-oriented lawyer, and I started my career with Infosys, moved to a startup called Indicom, then I was with IBM, and you've all heard from my colleague Aditi, who hosted one of the sessions earlier. And currently I'm with Microsoft. I'm a Microsoft baby. I've just been here for 6 months, but so happy to be here. It's a fabulous place to be in. And that's, a little bit, I'll take 2 minutes of your time to just talk a little bit about, the diversity and inclusion conversation that we have at Microsoft. And then we'll move to the session with Revati. I want to start by saying that Microsoft as a corporation is driven by the mission to be inclusive, to empower each and every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And to meet this mission, Revati, we define diversity very broadly to include the many dimensions that make people and organizations unique. And we actively engage in their different strengths, their experiences, the uniqueness and perspectives that they bring to the table, and we use it to challenge our thinking, to stretch the technology to suit that. We expect each of us, no matter what level, role, or function that we play, to play an active role in creating environments where people of diverse backgrounds are excited to bring all of who they are to the table. And we're gonna hear a lot more about this from Revati. And so, Revati, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself quickly before we move?
No, start with the questions.
All right. So, what were your early career influences and your experiences with Sony and Dodsell? Because Dodsell is a large infrastructure development company with global interests, for the information of the audience.
So, if you look at my career early career with Sony, that was my first corporate job, was way back in, how far was it? 84. So in those days, Japan did not see any women working in the organizations, in their corporate organizations, other than secretaries. So I used to have all these people coming in and taking photographs with me saying, this is the first time you're seeing a woman in a non-secretarial role, so we must take a picture. So, people used to photograph and say, in Japan, we never give our women these jobs. But then, I never felt dealing with them was ever a problem, because I had to deal with them all the time. That was never an issue. So it was really unique to find that they could openly express that this was something which would not necessarily happen in Japan. Of course, things would have changed.
You're a mini celebrity in Japan.
Actually, it was because they had to see who is this person who is looking after all finance stuff and sending us all these messages. Those days, early days, it was fax and various other things. Email wasn't there, so it was a different world. And when they see you in person, it's like, let's find out who this person, animal is, who's asking all these various questions. So, those were interesting times and difficult to imagine that we are living in a different world.
Sure.
And
did you face any kind of was there a power struggle, or did you feel that because you were a woman on the other side of this conversation that they weren't comfortable? Did you have to do more to put them at ease or to prove your worth or why you were at the table?
Surprising, I've gone through, obviously when you work for 35 years, you've gone through multiple organizations. I can't say that I really faced discrimination because I was a woman. Yes, sometimes you do feel discriminated against, not because you're a woman, but because you realize that there are certain things you're not so good at managing, maybe people or something or some situation or whatever, because it's not just performance that matters, it's not just what the knowledge that you have that matters. I think there are other things that matter in an organization, and sometimes you're not very skilled at it. But I wouldn't put a gender lens on it, because there are many people who may be skilled at certain things and may not be skilled at other things. Sure. Now, I think I grew up in an era where we did not have first of all, diversity as a concept was not there in the dictionary when I started out my corporate career. There was no concept of diversity, and there was no discussion. And most places, for the first 15 years that I worked, I was the only woman. So, you just generally fitted in, and nobody really thought too much about it. And when I look back, I see that my early career, at that time, there was no IT. And my early career was in jobs which did not take too many women. And that brings me to the next job that I had after Sony. I took up an assignment with Dotsel. I moved from Mumbai to Bangalore and I took up an assignment with Dotsel. Dotsel is a large general contracting firm which does infrastructure development like oil field development, fertilizer plants and chemical plants, very non-sexy if you look at it. You know, boring jobs where you have to go and stay in some remote location like Hazira or Rourkela or some place. It's not at all sexy. You can't, it's cut off from everything. You didn't have internet access. But one would frequently visit those sites, and I would be the only woman visiting the site because that was the job that I had. And I had to go to Iraq because we were doing a big project in Iraq. At that time, my daughter was all of 6 years old, and I had to take up this, it was a short-term assignment, it was a 1-month assignment in Iraq. And going there, 1,000 people in a place like Tikrit, so distant, it's not even in, you know, Baghdad or anything, it's in Tikrit. That's exactly where the war broke out. And it so happened that the war broke out 1 month after I came back. Just 1 month after I came back. And there were 1,000 men of all number of them workers, a few of them managers, and you had to wear overalls and go into the field. So it was quite an experience. You had to live in a caravan. So it was quite an experience. Yeah.
Did you feel differently being amongst all these men in a war-torn India, doing things as a woman alone? Did you ever feel that, you know, there is some kind of a difference, there is some extra strength or struggle required to shine in such a situation?
Frankly, I'll tell you, I was too excited because in those days, it was not so common to get an opportunity to travel abroad. And the very fact that I got an opportunity to go out of the country, I had gone to the US before and I had traveled to Dubai on work before, but just the sheer proposition that I got selected to go and do this job in Iraq was too exciting for me, and I was super excited, and there was nothing else which sort of bothered me in that whole thing. Of course, it was a little different and quirky, and sometimes you like quirky things, right? Wearing blue overalls and walking around in the oil field development project and then seeing what is happening. So sometimes I think that's the way you did it because you didn't have the luxury to think anywhere else. Because if I'd quit that job, there wasn't another job there weren't 100 jobs waiting for me. So I think when you just take what you get and then move along with it and don't overanalyze the situation and do the best you can, I must honestly admit that people were really, really nice. Maybe extra nice because they saw a woman whom they had never seen. Today, I would have overanalyzed and thought, oh my God, is it safe? I have so much information. Frankly, even my family was very excited that I got this opportunity. So, I mean, I think we are living in a little different world of a lot more information, lot more awareness. So what you don't know can't harm. Neither my parents, nor my husband, nor anybody knew what could happen if I went to Iraq. And frankly, nothing happened. But of course, 1 month later, the war broke out. So everybody realized what could happen.
So a quick question here, Revati. In that stage in your career, the young age that you were at, you were a working mom in a corporate job, right? Did you ever get these questions like, okay, so when you're sitting across somebody and they know that you're accomplished, they know you're there to do a job. But otherwise, you know, when you're getting to know them or, you know, drinks and dinner, did you ever get these questions like, so how come, you know, you're traveling alone or, you know, have you left your kid behind at home, or how do you manage your work and your life as a woman? Are those questions you've faced, or, you know, have you felt that these questions are there in the backdrop at that time?
No, it was not in the backdrop. That was very much on the forefront because it was, they would definitely ask, but they would ask because of genuine concern. Because they would say, I can't imagine my wife doing it, So we are really surprised, and there was a little bit of, how are you able to do it kind of thing. So I don't think I viewed it as negative today. I think we are also maybe in a little bit of a hypersensitive era where every question is sort of overloaded, and every question which is asked, so is it right, is the question right, is the answer right, so many things. I'll give you a small example. I was on the board of L&T for some time, a few years, and the chairman of the board, very, very good friend of mine, and really likable person, extremely respectful and everything. He just said, by the way, Revati, don't exhaust all, there is a limitation on how many boards you can be by company law. So he said, by the way, don't exhaust all of them, because I might have a vacancy coming up in one of my other companies where I want to invite you onto the board. Now, I might have a vacancy for a woman director coming up where I want to invite you. And that was the only possible time I sort of cringed, to say, hey, you called me because I was a woman director? No, because I've been on the boards of companies from the age of 35. So I don't need to be called on the board of a company. Because I'm a woman, I can be called on the board of a company for my capacity, my capability, and the experience that I bring, and the knowledge of functioning of boards, etc. So, but I just laughed it off. Obviously, one way is to take umbrage and get angry and upset and all of that. But I know that genuinely it was said out of respect. But what it showed me was there's still a kind of a gender lens which is so subtle that people don't even realize that it is operating. Because they recognize your competence, they recognize that you're adding value to the board, but yet, when it comes to inviting you on the board, the mind is actually thinking, is there a vacancy for a woman? Where does it say there is a vacancy for a person? The vacancy on the board is for a person, not a woman. So why do you need to wait for a woman to retire to bring on another lady? So those are the kinds of very subtle things. The thing is, sometimes the more we show competence, the less we wear gender on our sleeves, and the more we work towards doing a job well, I think the respect is phenomenal. So I think that's what I would focus on. So sometimes I use this as a conversation to tell people, yes, there is bias that exists. Because none of my career moves were because a diversity position was getting filled. This was the first time I heard this conversation. So that made a little bit of an impact, and I just stepped back and said, yeah.
Right. So you're talking about unconscious bias, because you're saying that he didn't mean to say what he did, or it didn't mean to come out the way.
He didn't mean to be disrespectful.
Right.
But I looked at it, oh my God,
Right. But then again,
I have a small question there, Revati. So I have been invited as a women director on the board, and I always make it a point to say, you know what, invite me as a director on the board. Sensitizing the other gender that, subtly you're saying this is also helpful. But we have, in India, over a period of time, made those giant strides, right? Creating a position for a woman at the table, at the board, is a great stride.
Yes.
And I think it might take a little bit of time for people to kind of look at it as capabilities, value that's coming to the board. But it's nice when, as women, we also make that effort to point it out that, hey, I think I'm a director on the board.
Yeah. So I think I have a small point to that. The fact is that the law requires you to nominate a woman director on the board. So when they say that they are nominating you as a woman director, the law is creating that distinction. While on a day-to-day basis, they are not creating any distinction once you're on the board. So as long as you are comfortable that they are not creating any distinctions once you are on the board, the law anyway requires you to disclose that. And it's good that, you know, we might say, this is affirmative action, was it required, is it my competence? We can overanalyze that situation. But I really feel that India is making great strides, because we said there should be an independent, a woman director on the board. Now from next year onwards, this financial year onwards, they've said it's not just a woman director, it has to be an independent woman director on the board. So we are making strides, because everybody's daughter, uncle, aunt cannot just now come onto the board irrespective of competence. So we are driving that conversation and the narrative towards competence.
I think those, yeah.
I would like to ask you one question. Why do you think that his invitation to you had involved some disrespect? And I would like to add something here. What you are missing is the experience of a behavior of an all-male board. When you sit in an all-male board, you sometimes realize that men are behaving in a way that can only be described as being completely ridiculous. The moment a woman joins a board, they stop just out of vanity to behave that way. So the idea of your friend might have been, I can't go on with that kindergarten. If I bring on just one woman, they will stop behaving that way. That's just my personal experience. So why was there this idea of disrespect? Thank you.
It was not really disrespect, but not being considered for the position of a board unless there is a vacancy for a woman director. The law specifies in India that you must have at least one woman director on the board. So what he said was, we might have a vacancy for another company, group company of ours, where we may have the need for a woman director. So please keep yourself available. So that's the point I was raising. It's not that I want a woman on the board because I want to bring diversity of experience. That's a very different thing. But to say that I have a vacancy for a woman director, I might have a vacancy. So till such time I have a vacancy, don't. I mean, it was said very lightly. I shouldn't even be talking about it like this.
No, you should.
But, but what I'm saying is, but having said that, I've never seen, during all my years of interaction, a single act of disrespect in any way. If at all, always it's been of tremendous respect.
I think if we're talking to unconscious bias, man or woman, at some point in your life, all of us have faced bias at some level, right? Is there anybody who wants to talk about a lack of bias in their entire lifetime of experiences? So there you go. I don't think it has much to do just with gender. I think that, you culturally sometimes carry your own baggage, you carry prejudices, you carry expectations, you bring those to the workplace. And I think that the conversation about unconscious bias is so important because, it gives a voice to the various issues that people face. Like an issue I face may be completely different from an issue you face, may be completely different from, the issue that a guy faces or somebody from a different country faces. The conversation sort of, I think it helps to bridge a gap.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to bring it into the conversation, even if it makes you uncomfortable. The more uncomfortable, maybe the better. Not sure about it.
So,
when... So did you ever feel, Revati, did you feel excluded or special in a positive way or differentiated in your various management roles, because of your gender?
No, I just want to take one point of my previous conversation,
sure,
the
please.
unconscious bias. And therefore, relating this unconscious bias that you have, that is where it starkly showed me that just having competence may not sometimes be good enough. It really clearly demonstrated that it may not be good enough. Sometimes some affirmative action is not a bad thing, because it forces you to think of women. So, for example, there are conversations that happen at around boardrooms. Oh, now the government has put this requirement that we must have independent directors on the board. Where are we going to find these women? I said, just look around you. There are so many women. It's just that, and they're working at senior levels in various companies. Why are you looking only for that phenomenal resume of, this 10 celebrities across the country, women celebrities across the country, and you want only those celebrities? Are all the males on your board only celebrities? They're not. So I think it forces you to look for people who are right under your nose, but you're not even considering them because somehow you're associating them with a different kind of glamour or, certain kind of position that that person has reached, and that means the rest of the people are not competent enough to hold that job, which is not a fact.
Right. So you speak towards competence and the strength that you brought to the various roles that you had in these companies. Did you ever wonder, with all these conversations about equal pay for equal work, did you ever wonder whether you were underpaid or overpaid? Or did you think about it? Did you try to find out about it? If yes, don't tell us any confidential information, but,
no,
but tell us.
By virtue of the fact that I held a finance function for most of my career, I had the good fortune of knowing everybody's salary. So
they couldn't con her.
Yeah, so while I can't talk about it, but I don't think I was discriminated in terms of pay.
But did
so
you
I didn't have to wonder. I didn't have to wonder.
So that's an excellent perspective. Did you see a disparity?
No.
Lovely.
But
Wow.
I do
so
wonder.
Many hands that are
but
going.
having said that, I want to put a counterpoint. I sometimes feel maybe for some reason I'm an outlier because I belong to a generation where we didn't have that luxury, and since it was only one, there was no need to create a discrimination. It was purely competence. But somehow I'm seeing a younger crop of people who are very competent, and I hear conversations around, even within my family, they're all very well educated and working in great companies like IBM, HP, etc., etc. And my brother-in-law had this conversation. He said, when we were discussing promotions, a whole bunch of guys came up and said, why do you want to promote her? She's anyway gone on maternity leave. Just postpone it for 1 year.
Lovely.
And this is the conversation, which is live conversation I know has happened, because my brother-in-law has said he heard this within his committee and he put his foot down because he had a wife working and he knew what it was to, discriminate just because the person went on maternity leave. So these conversations are happening. Maybe because there's just one, you don't feel it is impacting the company so much. But when there are larger numbers and when your workforce is 30%, then they start looking at the economics of all of this. And then start having, they are less productive. All these, I'm not saying they are less productive. Conversations, they are less productive, they are not there, they're going and looking after their children, they are taking leave for this and, to go to the PTA meet and whatever else. All these conversations are happening, actually.
Right. We had a couple of questions there, yeah.
Just in terms of the orientation, I think competence and diversity are often seen as some kind of mutually opposed goals. Either you're competent or you're filling up to diversity. And I think that's problematic because diversity in workplaces, they have to be, in some senses, at the first stage, engineered. But I don't think that's anti-competence, right?
Yeah.
Because I think there are ways in which we learn to ignore competence because we value some traits like confidence or ability to speak up more than we value other things. And I think the second point I want to make is, I think all of us, maybe 10 years after we start working, 15 years after we start working, we often adapt to the work culture around us, right? Which is predominantly male. And I think what happens then is that you actually become blind to one's own bias, because just because you're female actually doesn't mean that you're any more enlightened to diversity than your male counterpart. Sometimes after having spent years, and I say this because I'm a litigating lawyer, and when I look at younger lawyers, I look at men and women, I see that now I'm blind to it because I don't suffer from the same problems that they do. But when I open my eyes and I look around, actually there are distinct problems that women and men face, which are very different from each other. And particularly with, to give you an example, the rate of interruption. Because in court, if you just notice the number of times that women lawyers get interrupted and the number of times they interrupt, there's a dramatic difference between men and women. And these are also cultural, right? So if you see the sample size between South India and North India, just cultural plus gender plus economic plus caste, there are number of compounding factors that act. So, you know, your necessity to apologize, because when I interrupt somebody, I'll always start with, I'm so sorry to interrupt, right? Which is not a problem that many of my male counterparts may suffer. So the reason I'm pointing this out is because we are not actually outside the system, we are in the system, right? So we are only in a better position to talk about it, because some of us may have seen it over a number of years now and, you know, are in a position to recognize it. But I think it is invisibilized today, and the problem is that because there's so much conversation around diversity and gender, we somehow see these as some kind of bad words that we are uncomfortable with, you know. There's something wrong. We are deeply uncomfortable with being feminist or having used or having been seen to be using the gender advantage, which is what many people will apologize for. So when I start, I like, you know, be uncomfortable with being the token woman on a team, right? You're uncomfortable, but your discomfort actually speaks to the fact that you actually yourself are not able to reconcile the fact that diversity and competence are not two different things. So I'm actually saying this from a reflective standpoint, because I think a lot of the concerns that are raised here are actually coming from an internal struggle where you yourself are trying to identify what does competence mean, you know. So that was an orientation.
Yeah, I think it's
That's
a valid,
fabulous perspective.
valid, great perspective that diversity and competence are not mutually exclusive, and just because somebody filled a diversity quota doesn't mean any less competence. I think that's something that, and there are mechanisms to ensure that that is maintained, and as long as companies ensure that they maintain it and there is no dilution of standards. So recently I was present at a discussion at IIT Madras when the director was addressing a bunch of us. I'm not an alumnus of IIT Madras, but my husband is. So by virtue of that, I got to attend a discussion amongst the alumnus group. And the director of IIT was saying, one of the questions was, why is it that the diversity in IITs is still so low? So he said, you know, we're trying to address a lot of things. The issue is not about competence, because there are many, many women who can compete for an IIT slot, but they choose not to compete because of other social reasons, because they have to prepare much harder, and people at home, they are willing to prepare, but people at home don't allow them to prepare. So we are addressing some of this by having some online courses, etc., so that they can upgrade themselves offline, because I know people who go for IIT coaching, they reach home past 10:30. Most families at home will not allow their daughters to be out when they are so young, to be out till 10:30 in a coaching class, etc., etc. So then the next question came as to, will you be diluting the standards? He said, we have a target that over a period of time we'll get to 25%, but in the next 2 to 3 years. And the next question was, will that dilute standards? So he said, absolutely not. We're just reorienting the algorithms in a manner in which it allows for the considerations such as the location that the person has chosen, maybe closer to the place that they are living in, things like that. If we can make small adjustments without sacrificing quality, we can still get the gender up. So what I mean is, as long as people are extremely conscious and start making these statements, and they are very clear that you're not making concessions in terms of competence, but you're still understanding the reality of life and the social constructs within which people are working, and therefore, why is it that 50% of most engineering colleges have women? We don't have a STEM problem like the US has. In fact, women are encouraged in India to go out and take on engineering roles and engineering jobs. So we don't have a STEM problem, we don't have a STEM stigma at all. But we have an IIT versus non-IIT, because here you're local, you're living at home, so parents can keep an eye on you, all kinds of other things that happen. So yes, I fully agree with what you said.
I think, Chitra, there's something that you wanted to say.
I was going to ask in the context of the fact that you had ability to articulate. I was going to ask, you may not have been discriminated against, but did you see that kind of discrimination elsewhere, where there was a man and a woman equally placed, doing the same, equally qualified, and there was no reason to discriminate, but there was that discrimination?
I think I have not personally seen it, because I think early on there weren't other people in the organization, so I can speak about only my organization where I have intimate knowledge of. And over a period of time, when I moved into the IT industry, I was on the board of the company, so I could push a lot of the agenda and ensure that, if there was competence, if there were women, etc., those agendas could be pushed. And so I made sure to that extent. But I never heard the kind of conversation that my brother-in-law related, and I don't want to name the firm. The firm is a big, large, multinational tech firm where they really take diversity as a big, big issue. And these are the kinds of conversations that happen. So I know that it is real, and we can't wish away. When the numbers are larger, I think the pressure and the competition that people feel that is, I think, much higher, and therefore there is that intensity of feeling about entitlement. They are taking away my job. Society expects me to hold a job. Society doesn't expect her to absolutely hold a job. Society expects her, is okay if she decides not to work and decides to look after her child, and then my job is. So I hear a lot of stories of younger women who are in large IT companies where it's the norm to sit very, very late. Lots of people, lots of guys are sitting late at work. Not necessarily required, but women don't want to stay that late because they want to rush home. So there are all these challenges. I don't think these challenges can be wished away. There are all these perception challenges.
Right. So just to channelize this a little bit, do you feel, in your various roles and in the positions that you've occupied, do you feel that, gender diversity or diversity and inclusion is just sort of a check box for most companies, or do you feel that, there's a discussion, at the board level about differential hiring, even though they shouldn't be doing it, that, there's this target that we want to achieve, and, so let's put in like as many young women as possible, or women who already have children, so that, we don't go through this entire maternity cycle. Are those conversations that really happen? Because, yes? Okay.
So the board conversations are really interesting. There are different boards and different cultures, and so different cultures are very, very unique. So there is no one size fits all. It's just what that company or that management believes in, and it could be very, very different. So there could be companies that are extremely respectful of women and treating them pretty well, but not making any attempt, overt attempt to address the diversity issue. Once you're in, you are treated like any other person and you get, but they're not making any serious attempt. And standard response could be, oh, it's too difficult to find them. There are others where it is very easy to find. In fact, one of the boards on which I'm on, not in a position to disclose, obviously, he said there is not a single person. It's a company that can easily employ number of women. Why is there not a single person at the leadership team, a lady executive at the leadership team? So I raised this issue. Why is it that we don't have a single person in the leadership team as a woman? And the CEO started thinking. He said, yeah, you're right, but never thought of it that way. So we'll now make a conscious attempt. So there are companies that can easily employ, but they don't get. And I don't think it is a negative thing that we don't look for. These are all unconscious biases. I'm sure.
But isn't it in and by itself, a negative space? Because if that conversation is not there at the board level, or if that discussion is not there, that A, it's not a checkbox, or a quota that you need to fill, and B, it's about work-life balance, and it's not really gender-based, because men may also require flexibility, if you're an equal parent, or rush home, PTA meeting, so on and so forth. So
yeah, I have an interesting story to relate, because when I delivered my kids, my husband was not there both the times. He was traveling, and it so happened he was traveling, that's it. And those were the days there was no internet, there was no mobile. So he was traveling, and whenever he came, and he found the door locked, and he found me in hospital. So that's a different matter. But today, I find people walking up and saying, I need paternity leave, I need 2 weeks of leave, I have to be with my wife, and she's going to deliver on so-and-so date, and I'm not available for the next 15 days. So life has changed. So men are also demanding, which is the right thing to do. So they are demanding some of these things, and even if the policy may not have explicitly had that as a point, they are demanding, and which is the right thing.
Right. So, so you spoke towards, women, unnecessarily staying longer in office and trying to prove a point. Did that not happen, at the time at which you started work, when, you had to do more or do twice as much as somebody else sitting next to you did, because they were from a different, gender-based difference there? Do you think it's unique to the workforce now? Did it not happen earlier?
I think I don't think I ever sat late. I did stay late for a lot of times, but not because I had to show somebody that I was sitting late. Those days we didn't, when I started out early in my career, we didn't have computers, so everything was handwritten. Oh my God, can you imagine doing 100 multiple spreadsheets, rewriting those spreadsheets? It's a world I can't even imagine today. So if you have to do a different scenario, you have to start all over again in long, big sheets. It's a different world. 35 years ago is a long time. So yes, we ended up spending long hours at office, more because, we'd review and say, okay, let's create this new scenario. Then we go back to the drawing board all over again. And you can't click a button and pull out another scenario. So I didn't have the need, but I see a lot of people, including my daughter, who's today an MD at Goldman Sachs, saying the pressure is immense.
Right.
Pressure is immense.
Right.
And she had this conversation. Somebody said, oh, so when are you coming back after your holiday? 3 months maternity leave, and she's back at work after having twins. And this is the conversation she gets. So how was your holiday? I mean, it was no holiday. It was a lot of work. So,
but do you think this bias is just, male bias? Because I've had female colleagues who have asked me how my vacation went after my maternity. And so, do you think it's just a workplace bias as opposed to gender bias? Because I don't think it's necessarily just men who are biased in this.
Maybe this is a very controversial statement to make, but I have found more old world companies more respectful of the job that a woman has to do at home when doing all these things than some of the new age companies and hotshot careers.
Is that because you're assigning gender assigned roles in a traditional sense to the balance between what you do at work and what you do at home?
I've talked a lot about it with my daughter, my sister. They're all in different generations. So these conversations are interesting because why is it that in very old world companies, I found more respect for delivering a baby than she is finding in a new age company which is talking of diversity? There's something seriously wrong. I mean, Goldman Sachs is the gold standard for women with 10,000 startups and all kinds of things. But that doesn't change the behavior of all the people. So I'm beginning to think that new age careers have all these so many alpha males, alpha females. Their sensitivity to what is happening at home is sort of reduced, because I find in the more traditional companies which are not so, that doesn't require that kind of alpha presence, they are much more nurturing and much more reflective of the kind of roles that you're playing. It may be a controversial statement. I don't know. I have no statistic to prove it. It's just purely anecdotal.
Right. It's your experience.
It's my experience.
So, Revati, just a quick thing here. Do you feel that in those traditional companies or those, companies from that you felt behave differently, do you feel they actually reduced the role that women played at the workplace by? No. And you feel
But they did not actively seek out to bring diversity into the company. They did not actively seek out to say, I will have 30% hires by so-and-so date. They just took, if a person was competent, they took the person. And then once the person came in, they were respectful. They said, take your leave. Your child needs that attention. All of that, very respectful about those kinds of things. Now, I don't know, a lot of women may not like it today. That's also the sensitivity that we are going through. Because I don't think we need to be that sensitive when somebody says, you take your time and come back. That I think is more out of concern. But I guess it could be out of concern or it could not be. I have had another situation when my mother passed away, and one of my bosses, and again can't disclose the company, said, don't come back for 1 month. And I knew that was not because he was very concerned about my personal situation. So there are situations which are, but I don't know whether that is gender bias or just a person. So everything you cannot put a gender lens to it.
But there's a conflict there, right? Because for generations, women have been striving for, say, let's call it equality at the workplace. And then, when there is a point of view that, based on my gender or based on my, physical requirements, maternity leave, so on and so forth, people treat me differently. Do you feel that in the kind of new age workplace that you see today, the women have to sacrifice or set aside those aspects and sort of concentrate solely on their careers or their professional lives to feel equal or be equal? Do you feel companies view it like that?
Again, different companies have different cultures. Some have more nurturing cultures, and some have less nurturing cultures. And the company may have a culture, individuals will behave still differently.
Right.
So I think if you're in a bad spot, you need to put them back in their place. And for example, when my daughter heard, after struggling with twins and really having a rough 3 months, when she heard, how was your vacation? Anyway, you were on chutti. So if somebody says something like that, she said, excuse me, this was not a holiday at all. Please come and spend 2 days in my house and you will know what's going on. So I think you have to put people in their place when that kind of a conversation. You had good relaxed time and coming back to work. So that's really not the point.
Hi. So it's something that you've touched on already, and it's probably something that seems quite obvious, but I really think that with gender diversity, I think it's so important, the idea that, we shouldn't give that lady a promotion because she's going to go on maternity leave and all these things as well. But what about the responsibility on the men? And I think that if you look at other countries where paternity leave, it's like, I think in some Scandinavian countries and in Europe in general, you can share maternity and paternity leave. You'll have 12 months, and I think there's a minimum. The men have to take 4 months or 6 months or something like that. And it gets rid of that bias, and then you'll see more female leaders in leadership roles in those types of countries. And I feel like that's something in Asia that really has to be talked about and pushed for. And I feel like right now we're still in such early stages. In Hong Kong, we just went from 3 days paternity leave to 5 days. Woohoo! That was considered
celebration.
It was considered a big deal. I remember during the discussions during the Legislative Council, someone actually walked out of the room because they suggested having 7 days paternity leave, and he was really offended by that. So, it's little steps we have to take, but I feel like it's so important to eventually get to that position where men are looked at as equal caregivers, and then in that sense, then that's when gender diversity can happen.
Right.
Such an interesting conversation that I just want to say, I think we have time for one more question or comment. And
I think we have somebody there.
So I don't know if this is going to be a controversial question. If it is, I'll sorry, I apologize in advance if this is a controversial question, but part of the discussion around diversity that we see in North America is around the notion of intersectionality. In other words, there can be different layers of challenges that people face in terms of their integration into society. And so it can be because you're a woman and you're black and you're lesbian and, and. So for me, as somebody coming from outside the culture, it strikes me that there could be an intersectionality issue around caste and diversity. And I don't know, is that something that is addressed in the workplace? Is that something that with, for instance, the technology companies that are sort of open and whatever, is the issue of caste and diversity also part of the discussion?
That's a really interesting question.
But
because
not in the corporate world.
No, but that is a conversation that we need to have in a country like India. You completely hit the nail on the head from my perspective, because I think when we talk about diversity and we talk about inclusion, we talk about the differently abled, we talk about accessibility, we talk about gender diversity, but the conversation in India is not, there is no race-related conversation because we don't have that problem, but we do have a caste-related problem. It's not something that's addressed. It's not, there are reservations, made by the law, but it's not, I'm certain it's not talked about at boards that, let's have, equal representation of various castes in the company. I don't think caste is even a topic that's brought up. And it's sort of like, there's this amazing book called White Fragility. I love that book. It talks about how the white male is prejudiced by the very fact and circumstances of his birth to be brought up to an adult who has biases that he himself does not recognize. And I think in India, we sort of have it in a different way, that we believe, you know, we're not biased, or, you know, we don't need to talk about it because it's not an issue. But the reality is that the circumstances of our birth or our religion or our caste really does make a difference in the kind of access you have to education, to resources. And it is a real problem. I don't think it's addressed. If anybody has a different point of view, you know, happy to hear it. Yes.
Yeah, so
I think
caste would
so.
be a very complex issue, and I would not recommend caste to be, maybe, it's good to have some healthy debate on that, and I know we are massively over time, but my personal view is diversity across economic strata is something which is welcome. I would hesitate to put a caste lens on it. I think as long as we have competence, because caste, you have people today over a couple of generations in various strata have moved up significantly, and therefore to put a caste lens on something when you recruit may be actually counterproductive to the real issue of giving people opportunity. It may get you diversity of whatever kind, but it may not give you...
But wouldn't the counterpart in the Western world be the race lens then?
I think the race lens there is a little different because they are immigrants from other countries. But here you are an Indian citizen. You have been born in this country. You don't have to fight for any of those kinds of things. Yes, the opportunity not available is because of your economic status. If you want to create larger opportunities, then I think I would be very supportive of that. But trying to bring caste, today we have a government which has brought caste right up to the top, that everything is layered on caste. It's really destroying the fabric of society today, and it's really creating a significant churn, and I'd be very concerned if we brought it to the boardrooms. It may cause a lot of turmoil, I feel, and already we can see a lot of turmoil which should not have been there. Race, religion, and all kinds of conversations.
Sure. So before we wrap up, any more thoughts on this, or you know, we can take it off the stage. We have a dinner and we have drinks post there.
Thank you so much, Revati and Ashwati, for steering this conversation. And thank you so much, lovely audience, for joining in, sharing your thoughts. Well, I wanted to end on this note. It gives us enough inputs for, you know, thinking of a topic for the next IWIN meeting. And, you know, as a woman of my generation, the upbringing that I have had and the limited view that I have had, I have always felt that, you know, we have it better than our mother's generation, for example, right? A slightly older generation. I always feel that I have it better because we are having all these conversations. We have laws. We have so many opportunities, platforms to you know, come up and talk about our issues. But it was interesting to get your perspective on how so much information can also be a bane. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh no.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being such a wonderful audience.
Thank you so much.